All right, everybody. Now I have the swing of Nelly Korda. I've heard quite a lot of things about her, and I have seen her play some tournaments as well. And I have noted that her golf swing is really, really beautiful. So we're going to go through it and have a look at her fundamentals first and just see what makes up Nelly's swing. Why it looks so effortless and so rhythmic as well during when she hits the ball. So let's have a look at her setup to begin with. So I would imagine that the iron that she has is probably something like probably a 7 iron or an 8 iron there. So in terms of ball position, now ball position, we like to have the ball position just forward of center. Okay, that's really what I preach, to make sure the ball is not too far back in the stance. That can be the biggest error for people trying to hit iron shots. With the ball position slightly forward, it allows you to transfer your weight a lot better. Now with Nelly here, I would say that Nelly's position is actually more like around middle. Okay, so hers is probably just a little bit back. Now, in relation to where the head is though, you'll see really good players with the ball directly below their left ear. Okay, so that means the head is just behind the ball, which is a really great thing to have when you're setting up to it. You want to have the head just behind the ball again because it helps you transfer your weight better on the follow through. The more that the ball is too far back in the stance, like I just said, we tend to reach back for it and the head is in front of the ball, which just makes us not being able to transfer our weight as effective as if the ball is, a little bit forward of center. Okay, so grip wise, okay, I'm not able to zoom in completely for the grip, but to me, it looks like the grip is nice and neutral there. Now, we're going to have a look at the relationship between the left shoulder and the left hip. So, I like to have the left shoulder and the left hip lined up nice and straight. So, let's just see with Nelly here. We're just going to draw a line down. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So, the left shoulder is roughly in line with her left hip at her setup position. Okay. Stance is actually quite wide. Generally, you like to keep the stance around shoulder width apart. She does have her stance quite wide for like a 7 or an 8 on that she's hitting here. All right, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that you need to be very good at turning your body and not swaying onto the back foot. So oftentimes if I have somebody who tends to sway too much on the backswing, I will get them to err on the side of having their feet a lot narrower, because it allows them to turn their body a lot more and not move their head so much on the backswing. Okay, but let's see what happens with Nelly during her backswing. Okay, so just drawing a circle around the head. Let's do that again. All right. Righty, so as we take the club back, you can see here that the lower half is very, very quiet as the club head starts to move. Okay, it's still very quiet. All right, I'm just going to have a look to see when the hips start to really turn. Okay. All right, about there. So just past. All right. So yes, her lower half moves quite late. So I like to get the club head move past that right toe first. I should say the right foot first. And then I like to see the lower half start to turn. And that includes the hips. And the last thing to move on the backswing is that left knee. Okay, so she has beautiful sequence here because the upper half is moving first. The lower half is really stable. There's nothing really going on there. So this is the most stable lower half I've seen for quite some time. So the lower half is really stable, a very athletic position. She's starting to turn her body now, so hips are going to start to turn. The pressure is staying inside the right foot. So her lower half at the moment is extremely stable, which is what we want to see out of a really fantastic golf swing. So we can see that the pressure is staying inside that right foot. She's starting to now turn. Now, Her hips, I'm going to keep going. So the hips have basically stopped turning when the hands reach around shoulder height, which is very normal for a good player. Okay, so let's pause at the top of her swing. Now, there's some things here that I really love. I just love the angle of her legs here. Okay, so her lower half is extremely stable. The pressure's inside her right foot. Her left knee is barely moved as well, which is what I love to see. So it's basically someone who's got a very strong lower half, who's moved the club face first on the backswing. So moved her upper half first, followed by the lower half, okay? So all that the lower half is really doing here, and this is what you'll see in a really great golf swing, is the lower half just basically resists the upper half, okay? So that's its job. If the lower half can resist the upper half, then you've got a very, very stable golf swing, okay? So you can see this here, that the lower half is very much staying in the same position. So the legs, okay, the feet. Okay, so it's going to start turning. All right, so let's have a look at what the head does as well. So let's just draw that circle again. Let's see what happens to the head on the backswing. All right. So what I do when I teach too, I work within parameters. So it's very unrealistic to keep the head in exactly the same spot, same level during the backswing. That's our goal, but what you'll see that most good players do, they might even move their head a tiny bit to the right on the backswing. But as you can see, I've drawn that circle around her head and she's still keeping within that circle, so that's good. So the head moves back just a little bit. Okay, let's have a look at her wrist angles as well. So with her wrist angles, I would say that her wrist angles are more likely lower than 90 degrees. Okay, so she's creating a lot of wrist angle at the top of her swing. Okay, so she's generating a lot of potential power onto the downswing. Now I can see a club face here at the top, which basically means that it looks like her club face is in a little bit of a closed position at the top of her swing. If you start seeing the club face exposed there on a side-on view like we are right now, it means her club face is perhaps just a little bit closed at the top of her swing. All right, so now we're going to get to the top. So I'm loving this so far. Really stable lower half. Now I just drawn a line just down from her left hip. Let's just see what happens with her weight transfer. All right, so as she comes through now, all right, okay. So she's very much got that pulling of the chain look coming down. So her lower half is initiating first. So if you remember me telling you that you'll see the really good players, the upper half will begin the backswing followed by the lower half. But on the way down, the lower half now will start first, followed by the upper half, okay? So her sequence now is lower half, then upper half. Okay, so lower half is going first. Now, she's got so much angle in her wrists. So she's got the potential of having a lot of power on the downswing. That's pretty extraordinary there. And that's really, really good. It's very much Sergio Garcia-like there. Okay, so as we come back down, and this is the other thing to note here, is that once the left hip bumps forward, I'd say about 3 inches or so. Now, what should basically happen when I've drawn that second line? I've drawn that second line right on her left hip. So once you've bumped forward, you'll typically see good players stay on that line throughout their downswing. Let's just see what happens. So she's got, again, a lot of angle there with her wrists. Let's just see. So she's still got a lot of angle, a lot of angle, a lot of angle. You can see that that left hip is staying on that second line I talked about. All right, now we should start to see the club face start to catch up with her hands now. All right, so we can see there that at the point of impact, the hands are in front of the club face, which is a really good thing to see. You can see a little bit of an angle in the right wrist. So you know that the shaft is leant forward, which is very common for great players, okay? And to have the shaft leaning forward, it just means the club face is going to stay really controlled through the hitting area. And also using all the power of the back of your left hand, which is the most stable part. And with that right hand a little bit hinged, it just means you've maintained the angle through impact. Okay, if that right hand straightens too much, then we start to get flippy through impact, and that's when we start to lose control. All right, coming through. Now, it's important to note with really good players, the left hand starts to disappear by around hip height, which you can see there that the glove is disappearing now. It means it's released through the impact area. She keeps her head down looking at the ground for a long period of time. All right, very good golf swing. Just a swing that you enjoy watching because you can obviously see she's very athletic and she's just such a stable lower half, okay? So it looks like this kind of swing can really hold up under pressure as well. Now, let's just see with this head. I'm interested to see where this head is on the way down. Okay, so the last thing we're going to look at. So we come up, transfers her weight, head stays back, head stays back. Okay. So you'll often see this with some really elite players too, that their head starts to come back a little bit. So we see that with Jason Day as well. Jason tends to bring his head back as he hits the ball. Head stays down, head stays down. Okay. The only thing I would say with Nelly is that the only way I can see the swing ever go wrong is if the head stays back too long. Okay? Because with the head staying back too long sometimes, the hands can get a little bit active. Now, I'm not sure what her miss is, but just looking at this, I reckon that she might have a miss in her every now and then of hitting it low left. Okay, and that would just be simply from the head staying back a little bit too long instead of the head releasing a little bit more through the ball. All right. When you're young, you can have a swing like this. When you get a bit older, it's difficult to have the head back for so long. All right, guys, that concludes another dissecting of a Tour Pro swing. Tune in next time for some more.